Welcome back to Phantomworks, our second podcast, and this is all things Phantomworks. So today we have a guest that has a rather interesting past. You may know him. He was the host of a series called Unplugged Nation, where he talked to and taught people everything they need to know about homesteading. A Jersey boy. I mean, we're talking, when you think of a city boy, a Jersey boy, you would think of anything but a homesteader. Well, this guy went and did something even a little bit crazier than that, and he left Jersey to go to Hawaii, and in Hawaii has taken up homesteading. So for me, I have a bit of a problem with this because I think of Montana, Wyoming, Virginia, even Northern California as homesteaders. I think of Los Angeles and Hawaii as ritzy vacations, but there is another side to Hawaii. And today my guest is Jay Gruen from the series Unplugged Nation, and I'm going to be talking to him. Welcome to the show, Jay.
How's it? How we doing?
Not bad, not bad.
Enjoying your day out there? You enjoying your winter out there in frozen Virginia?
Well, wait a second. Our winters here aren't that bad. I mean, no, they're not Hawaii winters. I mean, I'm assuming it's probably, 70, 80 there today?
Well, actually, we're having a bad stretch of weather. It's about, this morning when I got up early, it was about 60 degrees, which is funny because, now living in Hawaii for, just under 5 years, give or take, I become soft. My friends laugh at me from the East Coast because, I look at their pictures they're posting of ice storms and all this other nonsense. And I'm just like, man, I don't miss that. Absolutely do not miss that.
Yeah, I've been to Hawaii several times, only for a week or two at a time, but I never had other than perfect weather anytime in Hawaii. I don't think there is anything but perfect weather. So I kind of understand. Yeah, I think you are getting soft when you say 50 is cold, but coming from a little bit of time in Hawaii, I actually understand that.
Yeah, and I mean, to be sure, I live what's called upcountry on Maui, and upcountry is some spots very much look like Idaho, northern Idaho. Some spots look, like a jungle. Some spots look like a temperate meadow somewhere in the middle of Middle America. On the Big Island specifically, they have I think it's 11 out of the world's 13 climate zones on the Big Island alone.
Right.
And it's funny, you alluded to people thinking about Hawaii in terms from a vacation, or we've seen it in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, or we've seen it in Magnum PI, or whatever it is. Hawaii is like this unattainable goal. It's like this place where people only go on honeymoons and everything else. But I mean, the very foundation of the culture out here is based on self-reliance. And two interesting points on the Big Island. The country's largest ranch, Parker Ranch, resides on the Big Island. Now, we all see Yellowstone and we see all these TV shows and think Texas and Montana, but geographically, the largest ranch in the country is Parker Ranch. And then the largest subdivision in the country is Ocean View. When you think of suburban sprawl, Los Angeles, and you think of all these cities that just go forever, you have the biggest subdivision in the country on the Big Island.
Well, I hate you even more now that you have big ranches out in Hawaii, because I have been to Maui. And I do know that it's got a very diverse, one side of the island seems to be lush and the other side's dry, right? Is that kind of an oversimplification?
Well, yeah, basically with the Hawaiian Islands, you have what's called leeward and windward. And the windward side of the islands are usually more wet because all the storms come in that way. And then because of the elevation of centers of the island, Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, on Maui, it's Haleakala, the weather patterns kind of get disrupted. But the west side, which is out by Lahaina and Kanapale, they tend to be very dry, very arid, lots of brush fires. But when I first moved to this farm about 5-6 months ago, it was a dusty mess. It was, very few, and we had, something like 160 head of goat out in the pastures. We're 40 acres. But we had to irrigate heavily. One of my first big responsibilities when I got on this was really shake down the irrigation system here. And now we've had our winter weather come through, and we've had some pretty biblical rainstorms that lasted 3 days. I mean, if I was on a boat, I'd pray for death. These were pretty bad rainstorms. And within 2 weeks, everything was lush, green, verdant. Everything that was once dusty, sagey, prickly pear all became this clover and all these different grasses. And now you look out here and it's just everything is lush and green. In fact, I was on a tractor this morning and I was cutting down some stuff. It was cut 2 weeks ago and it was now past the second rail on the fence. I mean, stuff grows out here. And it's funny, folks don't understand, like, so every time you go to a shopping mall, every time back east you go to a doctor's office, every time you go to a office building with a big lobby, they have all these plants. Those plants grow on the side of the road here. So it's like this fascinating place where it's a clip it and stick it kind of mentality. You go up to even it's like a plumeria tree. You just break a branch off, stick it in the ground, and you're gonna have another plumeria tree. It's really interesting in growing things out here because you have to play the weather. But the one variable that we do not have is we do not have those crappy winters you guys got to deal with. If you're homesteading in Alaska, you got two seasons.
Wait, hang on. Crappy winters? I live in Virginia. We're in the South here, my friend. We're south of the Mason-Dixon. We don't have crappy weather. I would argue that Virginia, in my opinion, has better weather than Hawaii because I actually like 4 seasons. So, but let me just sort of summarize what you just said. Number one, you complained about dusty and prickly pear and things like that in Hawaii. Number two, I think you suck because you're living in Hawaii, which is the single most beautiful place that I've ever seen. And number three, what are you doing wearing a flannel, a t-shirt, and a snow knit cap and a beard? I mean, I would swear that I'm talking to someone in Norway or Greenland, and here you are in Hawaii dressed like you're about to step out into a blizzard. So you suck. I hate you. You live in a dream spot. I wish I could be there. And back to you.
So the weather here is we're on the side of a volcano, and there was snow up at the top of that volcano probably 2 weeks ago. It wasn't substantial, but it was 3-4 inches. They shut the top of the mountain down. Mauna Kea had snow all through winter. Mauna Loa as well. Mauna Loa, in fact, it snowed on Mauna Kea while the same day the volcano erupted on Mauna Loa. So there's fire and ice in the same place. It's a pretty fascinating place to consider farming.
All right. So let me just, I appreciate the pity party of you having, snow during the winter and fire and ice at the same time. But it doesn't make up for the fact that you live in Hawaii. I'm sorry, you still suck and I still hate you. But what I'm really fascinated, Jay, is the fact that you went to Hawaii to homestead. So can I start with a very basic question? And this is one that's at sort of the heart of a much bigger issue. Why are you homesteading?
Well, homesteading, I started way back. I was a professional landscape designer, was my career for many years in North Jersey. I grew up 15 minutes out of Manhattan. I sound like Tony Soprano and I look like Larry the Cable Guy. I'm enigmatic that way. But when my children were smaller, I wanted more accountability for the food. You can go to like a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's and you buy your meat on a black styrofoam tray for 40% more than it costs on a white styrofoam tray from, Foodland or wherever. And the bottom line is it's all the same meat. And if anybody had any clue how long that meat was hanging in cold storage before it got to that styrofoam tray, they'd never, ever eat meat. So people have this disconnect with their food. And it was fascinating to me because I was then at the time building these huge, like just ostentatious and opulent outdoor kitchens, $100,000 for backyard outdoor kitchens. And I was putting all kinds of like ornamentals, like azaleas and ornamental grasses, and was even planting herbs around these outdoor kitchens. And I had this aha moment. And I was like, man, you know what? I'm planting nothing that's edible around these gardens. So that paired with wanting to be more accountable because my kids were young. Then also I have all this horticultural ability. I wanted to apply it, and I wanted to apply it to small spaces. And I wanted to teach people that you can grow a whole bunch of food normally on a south-facing shed exposure, people tend to hang a kayak or a ladder or something of that nature. I was putting gutters up on the side of the shed and growing lettuce. Now the rabbits can't get it and the groundhogs can't get it. And I'd utilize this 400 square feet of space that was otherwise wasted. And then you partner that with a gutter system that feeds the other troughs, and now you're doing aquaponics to some degree, and then you're throwing tilapia into the mix, and it just kind of snowballed. And I wanted to learn more and more. And then in addition to that mix, I was watching documentaries like Farmageddon, Food Inc., the Rotten series on Netflix. And factory farming is horrifying. Like, the disconnect that the general public has is terrible. And I really wanted to be kind of a part of that groundswell. So I got involved and I started doing it. And, I got a call one day to go host a TV show, and they ran me up the flagpole over at A&E, and then I got the gig on Unplugged Nation.
So if I summed all that up, I would say that you're doing it primarily because of food. I'll just call it food health, food nutrition is sort of your primary motivator. Would that be fairly close?
I would say that the biggest would be health and accountability, understanding where it comes from. It just doesn't come on a styrofoam tray.
It's not moving any gears at that point.
Phantomworks is working hard. Come along for the ride.
Can we work on a 1980 or 81? 80? El Dorado, absolutely. What's the better question?
Will we?
Will we? Not a chance in Hades.
Featuring Dan Short and his army of restoration technicians.
I know we're labeled mechanics and car builders, but the reality is at FantomWorks, we're really more about connecting people and the memories of their cars. One more time.
Watch complete restorations,
I'd like to change this.
resto mods, and rebuilds from the ground up. Pushing the limits from vintage to off-grid and beyond.
I've also wanted to do an EMP vehicle.
As a matter of fact, EMP falls right in line with what we're doing.
Don't miss a single adventure with Phantomworks. Subscribe and click the bell today.
My motivation is a little darker than that. Look, I was a Green Beret, taught survival, showed people how to snare and trap animals, and how to grow things, how to kill, how to process. So I sort of had a background in doing that, but for me, the motivation is fear. I've seen what's happened in the last 3 years where one day toilet paper is unobtainium, then paper towels, then eggs. Then I watched beef take 400% and 500% increases in price at the counter almost overnight. And so for me, it's almost a fear of not being able to get it at all, or if it is available, being so expensive that there's going to be competition for it, and there's just not going to be enough of it to go around. Then when I watched Sri Lanka and what's happening in Egypt and in Buenos Aires and all these other countries that are running out of food, it was fear of not having it. But as I started producing my own, I realized that the food I'm producing is so much healthier. So that became my secondary motivation, is I'm now eating beef without growth hormones, and my beef eats food that is all natural. My chickens eat all organic, natural food, producing organic, natural eggs. And the taste is better, but really, I feel like I don't have to sit down to pee anymore because the estrogen levels in my body are going down as I'm being pumped less and less estrogen by society. So.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly that is a really, it's a cornerstone of this whole movement. But I think too, a lot of folks just wanted that accountability, that self-reliance. There's obviously the prepper aspect to it, the guys who live in, abandoned school buses surrounded by landmines. And, there's so many different facets to this homesteading, contemporary homesteading world that there's a little place for everybody. We can all just kind of play in the same sandbox because at the end of the day, our goals are relatively the same. I don't necessarily think there's going to be a zombie apocalypse, but at the end of the day, I'm going to know how to grow food. And, if I saw meat jump 400% at the counter, I would have eaten my dog. So
believe me, I thought about it, but Heidi's lost a lot of weight, so we let her go. No,
Nice.
we've seen. Look, hamburger for a long period was $9 a pound for cheap hamburger. I bought a T-bone steak at Walmart. It was $27 a pound at Walmart. I didn't think Walmart sold diamonds for $27 a pound.
Really?
So the prices just sort of go all over the map. And so I'm a much happier person now that I'm sort of producing my own food. What do you know? You talk about how long a piece of beef has stayed in a package and things like that, and that bothers me. But that isn't at the forefront. What is at the forefront is the fact that people are now experiencing higher than normal cancer rates because of the amount of estrogen and the lack of testosterone that they're getting in their diets. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, I think, to speak at ad nauseum about that would be above my pay grade. But, I'm literally here on Maui on the farm. I am about 15 minutes away from one of Monsanto and Bayer Food Science's biggest proving grounds, and then, you look at the agricultural history of, a lot of the Hawaiian Islands and the sugarcane here. Sugarcane was a huge burden on the land, but they still grew it. So, it's really, I look at it from more of a non-revisionist historian way. I look at all the ways that we've made mistakes with the land, and we call it the Aina here in Hawaii. It's actually my dog's name, Aina. So when the first Europeans came to North America, they didn't ask the Lenni Lenape Indians about how the Three Sisters garden works, companion planting. How do we work with the land that you have? This is new land to us. How do we not destroy our land like we did when we had the Irish potato famine and we made all these fields fallow and now everything's only good for graze? We didn't ask those questions. We just came over here and said, oh, well, this is the way we do shit and this is the way it's going to get done. There you go. And then we just kept pushing people who knew what to do, kept pushing them west, kept pushing them out of their lands. And instead of taking that wealth of knowledge that survived for thousands of years without any European technologies or anything else, they said, well, we could do it better. And reality is that we can't. Then fast forward, you get out here to Hawaii, same thing. You have people and cultures from all over the world, descending upon these islands because they're beautiful and idyllic. But very few people came and asked the ancient Hawaiians or the Polynesians, hey, man, how are you guys doing it? Tell me about this Ahupua'a system. Tell me about, how you guys work the land. Instead, it was, now there just seem to be growing condo complexes and hotels. But, for the most part, it's still a very agrarian, like Molokai, Lanai. Larry Ellison bought that almost entire island. He owns like 98% of it. The only 2% he doesn't own is sand because no one's allowed to own sand. But he is turning it or keeping it and preserving the culture and preserving the natural, kind of pristine ideology of the island, which is great because he owns it, so he could do that. But there's huge, like everybody lives out here on a homestead because that's how they grew up. They grew up growing their fruit, growing their taro, growing the stuff that was their staples, and trying to import as little as possible.
In Hawaii right now, you talk about sort of people doing this more. I find it ironic that as we go into the future, we actually find ourselves needing to go back into the past because there were a lot of things we did a whole lot better 50 and 100 years ago. For instance, I'll just tell you that I've got dairy cows and I milk them, and I'm working on ways, I'm processing all my milk, mostly without refrigeration, just in case I need to. So I am separating the cream from the milk without refrigeration, without equipment, without electricity. Then I'm churning the cream into butter, again without electricity, and then storing it without electricity. So it's rather interesting that the older I get, the more I want to go back in time 100 years to the way my grandparents and great-grandparents did it. And it sounds like there's some of that going on in Hawaii.
Well, I think that there's some of that going on in Hawaii, but Hawaii, and I'm no expert on the culture here. I just love the culture. I love the folks that are out here. I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding about the folks that are from the Polynesian islands and living out here. We tend to think that they're the folks putting flower lays around your neck and doing hula when you get to the airport. And these are the folks who, serve your breakfast at the hotels and everything else. But the reality is, these people, they endure a lot of like internal struggle, but also the external burden of the entire world wanting to descend upon their homeland and, just enjoy it and love it too much.
So one of the aspects of homesteading that I find fascinating and ironic is that, there's this whole push for this Green New Deal and everybody wants to take away the cars and away the airplanes. And yet I never hear about these people talk about recycling. I never hear about them talk about taking the land and the animals and actually using the natural ecosystem that would just exist if we let it and sort of using it in a way that makes sense. We throw away so much in the garbage cans. We throw away food. I think we could feed 5 or 10 developing nations just with the food we throw away. So for me, this whole homesteading thing, you can't even imagine what I recycle. I'm literally recycling animal waste. Everything from our food all the way through the food chain, and then the animals get what's, a portion of it, and then whatever they use for waste or they produce as waste, we turn it into the next process. So are you doing some of that with your goats and llamas?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I live and work on the goat farm, but I have very little to do with the livestock rather than occasionally helping with a birth or dealing with the herd or whatever else. It's interesting, though, but we are on this farm very environmentally minded. Plus, you also have to think that what do you do with all the garbage when you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? And there's already a plastic landmass the size of Texas floating around out in the Pacific Ocean that's just people's waste. So we're very sensitive here. We have, all the cardboard, all the plastic, all that stuff gets recycled as per, everybody else in the kind of the world now. But, the goats are out there fertilizing the fields. They're doing their thing. We do a lot of construction, like little goat houses and stuff. I'll build them out of pallets and, recycle that kind of upcycling and reusing the most you can. One of the best examples I saw is a guy who had an old swimming pool in the ground and he couldn't deal with getting it repaired and paying for it. Rather than filling it in, he sealed it and he filled it with water and tilapia. He put an aquaponics setup over 1/4 of it, and then he put a chicken coop over the other 1/4 of it. And the chickens would feed the fish, and then the fish would feed the plants would clean the water, return it back to the fish. And it was this closed system of aquaponics plus one. I find it a little gross that, the fish are eating, the chicken waste, but, that's it. That's what they do. They're bottom feeding fish tilapia.
Well, and it's funny because I actually have the opposite visceral reaction. I think it's amazing when I watch my chickens walk through the cow patties and they pick out all the nutrients that are left in the cow patties. And then we collect up the cow patties and dry them out and then mix them with topsoil or with soil and compost and turn that back into plant beds for, nutrients for apple trees and peach trees and tomatoes and lettuce. So it's fascinating. Look, once a carbon compound is basically produced by a living organism, that carbon compound can just continually be cycled right back through, many, many times. And I don't see any point in wasting any of it.
Well, on my one homestead that I developed, I had, worm composting. And, talk about the zero end of any waste. Once it gets to the worms, you're at the end of the road because now they're producing, the great compost, but also compost tea, which is amazing for seedlings. And, you just have to know where to put the right waste in the right spots. I'd go fishing and most of my fish guts and fish heads would end up in a compost bin, but I have to let it cook longer. When I had the alpaca, all their waste. Alpaca are one of the best homestead animals ever. First of all, people don't realize in most countries they taste delicious. You have the wool. The wool has no lanolin in it, so it's easier than dealing with sheep. They use dedicated dung piles, which is amazing because when you go out in the pasture to clean up after an alpaca, you throw it all in one wheelbarrow, you dump it in your compost bin, and you don't have to cook it off. It's not real hot. So you're putting almost that compost can go almost immediately into your beds, and it's fertilizer. You talk about the chickens, they're kind of a passion of mine. I love poultry. Joel Salatin once said, you have to harness the chickenness of the chicken. And Joel Salatin's from out your way. He's Polyface Farms out in Virginia, I believe, or West Virginia. But, he talks, it's almost evangelical when he talks about farming and homesteading. And, that's why now when I can, I employ chicken tractors, rabbit tractors, because they're out there rototilling, they're out there fertilizing, they're out there pest control, and they're doing their thing, and you just move them, and you just keep moving them and rotate them, and the land is so much healthier because you're just taking the extra time and the extra effort to create this working system. When I have built my gardens on the mainland, I would build 4x8 raised beds that were only about 8 inches off the ground, but they all have hoops over the top of them with deer netting, and the sides pulled up. I can access, because I use square foot gardening principles from Mel Bartholomew, and all my crops are easy to get. The chickens never got into my gardens, the groundhogs, rabbits, nothing. But when the fall came and I had all these leaves to rake up, because I was still in kind of a suburban area, I would rake all my leaves into the gardens, and then I'd throw 6 chickens in each one of the beds, leave them in there for a couple nights, and I could take a pile of leaves about 2 feet deep, and they would reduce it to 6 inches of chopped up, beautiful fertilizer mixed in little rototillers. I'd throw it right in the compost bin, or I'd leave the bed and put the bed to sleep with what the chickens have done for me.
Oh yeah, we have a very similar process. We've got chickens, turkeys, pigs, goats, ducks, dogs, cats, cows, bees. We're sort of creating an entire ecosystem in one place. Oh, plus we have bluegill, bass, clam, oyster, catfish. We've got fresh and salt water that we're farming. So we're trying to do a little bit of everything. But when we eat dinner, and we eat really good these days, we're eating, very healthy, very nutritious food. And whatever's left over, the dogs kind of have first dibs. And whatever the dogs don't want, which isn't much, the pigs get. And if there's any greens, that goes to the cows and goats and the chickens. So there's always something waiting for the end. But we learned about this thing. It's called a pig bowl, and it's genius. So we don't rinse any of our food into our sink ever. Every bit of food we have gets rinsed into about a 2-gallon bowl, just with a small stream of water. We rinse it into this bowl, and we bring that out to the pigs. They think you've just served them up like a chocolate milkshake with pecans in it. They go crazy for just the rinsing of the plates. So in 3 years that we've lived in our house, I doubt we've put a pound of food down the drain in 3 years. Only water and turds go down, nothing else.
No, and that's in an idyllic situation. I mean, more people in the world will certainly do that. I look at society as we live in it now, and there's so much missed opportunity. I'm not a super religious person, but I'll tell you what, graveyards are a waste of space. Every one of those cemeteries should be a farm, especially in the urban areas that are experiencing food desert proportions right now. If we stop the antiquated ways of burying folks and just start planting trees instead, or fruit trees or groves or whatever, we might be better off using that space.
I'm going to be buried in a wooden box about a foot underground with an apple tree planted on top of me. I figure within 2 or 3 years, I will actually be producing apples. And that's kind of, to me, look, I'm 200 pounds of meat that shouldn't be burned in a kiln or pickled with poisons and then thrown in a chunk of concrete. It just doesn't make any sense.
Super admirable to compost yourself, but I'm going out like a Viking. I'm going to be on a burning raft. I'll feed the fish.
I mean, I don't have the beard. I can't do the Viking thing. So I would support it for you. But I just hope that the boat sinks fast enough that the fish get most of you. You know what I mean? Those look like some pretty tasty eyeballs.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, there's no shortage of fish that'll eat you out here in Hawaii. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
But I think that if we look at the way we have to really look at ourselves, and this is every culture, and this is every society, every city, every suburban area, the wasted space that we are not employing to grow food and to help. Like, one of the biggest travesties I ever heard of in Westchester County, I believe it was White Plains or Tarrytown or somewhere in New York, they were they hired someone to come in and kill all the Canadian geese in the parks because they were destroying the water. They're chasing little kids. I mean, Canadian geese are a nightmare. So they came up with a great plan: send someone in there, whack all these geese, and then process them and then feed them to the homeless folks, kind of help out two scenarios. And, the good old USDA came in and they said, well, big government says you can't do that. You can't feed those because they're not certified by the USDA. You show me a person starving on the cold streets of New York and tell me that they're not going to look forward to a goose dinner, whether the government says it's good or not. It's ridiculous. So we have all this policy and we have all this government that gets in the way of our food. And, that's kind of another thing I love about Hawaii, because, they don't enjoy big government, and they don't enjoy, being told what to do, especially because they know what to do with their land. Like, we don't. That's why I'm a student of the land now. I'm out here, I'm learning. I'm like Green. I might know how to grow all kinds of stuff on the mainland, but when I came out here to Hawaii, it's a different bag, man. And don't tell a Hawaiian how to do it. Oh, no. So, you just have to be a student and be humble.
So how do we get the morons like AOC and some of these others to actually see that there are real, tangible ways that people can do this? If you come out to my house, first of all, we probably only dispose of about 3 pounds of trash every week or two. That's it. Like, those big green containers that are all over the mainland United States? I couldn't fill one of those in 3 months because we recycle or compost or burn everything. All of our paper products that we don't reuse get turned into heat. And then the ash, you can reuse the ash. The ash from burning is actually an amazing byproduct for producing many great items. So, like, we literally throw away almost nothing, and yet we've got this society who has no problem with a landfill that's the size of Mount Ararat next to them, but they're worried about, well, we need to reduce the carbon footprint of your car and put everybody in $100,000 Teslas, and I just don't get the logic. So what are we going to do?
Well, not only that, but you think about the amount of strife that the land takes because we're building all these cars with these heavy metal batteries, and we got little kids mining all that stuff out in Africa somewhere, and everybody loves their iPhone and everybody loves their Galaxy tablet, but you know what? Some little kid made 2 cents an hour mining that shit out of the ground in the Congo. It's just, we have all this stuff in the world that we don't think about, because we pick up our phone and we could play Angry Birds. Like, okay, great. Where'd that phone come from? You get in that Prius, you get in that Tesla, or you get in that Leaf, and you're like, well, I'm saving the environment because you know what? I drive an electric car. All right, well, good for you. But there are some places it just does not make sense to have an electric car.
In this beautiful house is a picture of an unhealthy family. But what if they can make a better choice in the evening time as they unwind? What if they watch stories that were true, that were good, that were beautiful? Introducing C-Max TV. Live life to the max. C-Max.
A great example of that is Ewan McGregor and his buddy. They did 3 years, they did a series, Long Way Round, Long Way Down, and Long Way Across or something. And they're on motorcycles. Start out, first season, they're on BMWs. Second season, they're on something else. But the third season, they got on electric Harleys. And they were coming from South America, Patagonia, and going all the way up, I think, to Alaska. And they literally, production had to build gas stations, charging stations the whole way along. Like, even the production crew, they used these 2 pickup trucks that were still in development. They got their hands on 2 of those, and it was like a backup. You could tow one truck for a certain amount of miles and the battery charged the truck you're dragging, and that's how they leapfrogged through the really bad areas. So I don't think we're there yet with that technology. Plus, eventually we're going to have the same problem we have with batteries now. Eventually we're going to have to get rid of those batteries. Can't put them back in.
Yeah, we haven't even considered disposal of lithium ion. No one's looked at it. It's that dark secret that we just don't want to talk about. And here's an interesting thing about carbon footprint. I understand, and I've got it from good authority who did a lot of research. The carbon footprint of a Humvee and a Tesla are exactly the same at 100,000 miles on each. So if you've got a Tesla that you put less than 100,000 miles on, you are better off buying and driving a Humvee. It isn't until you go over 100,000 miles that the carbon footprint of the production of the battery actually meets the carbon footprint of the Humvee getting your, 14 miles to the gallon. So the truth is a little different than we think.
It looks way cooler when they grab high value targets in Humvees. It wouldn't look as cool in a Tesla.
Yeah.
So it's either got to be a beat up old Suburban or a Humvee or a Tacoma, a lifted Tacoma, but a Tesla wouldn't.
So Jay, I've come across a rather interesting phenomenon. Very, very few people will talk about homesteading. They won't bring it up. And yet, ironically, it's a little bit like erectile dysfunction. If you actually broach the subject and start talking to someone, they will actually happily join in the conversation once you've sort of broken the ice. So in the last 3 days, I have had conversations with, one was a young lady, one was a fairly young guy, and one was a slightly older guy from the city, a black guy. And, I kind of wanted to get, different people's perspectives on it. And I broached the subject with each one of them. And instantly they all said, well, wait a second. So what are you doing and how do you do that? And so rather than sort of being shunned for bringing up the subject, they all jumped on it like, white on rice. So how do you broach the subject and teach people about homesteading in 2023 when it's sort of perceived as caves and, M16s kind of thing to do?
Well, I think that, it seems that, it's not, the big three: never talk politics, never talk religion, never talk how much money you make with a coworker kind of thing. I think it's just that people don't have a working understanding of it because they haven't been raised in scenarios where they had to grow food. They haven't, they've never had to go hunting. They've never had to learn how to process an animal or field dress and I think that a lot of folks typically have a thirst for knowledge, but we're so inundated with so much stimulus often, like it's just too much to think about. And then we end up on a screen, or we end up, instead of going out and digging a garden, or, we stick with what we know because it becomes the easy suburban way to think or the easy city way to think. And like I said, we've all been guilty of it. I grew up 15 minutes away from, Manhattan and North Jersey. And I didn't grow up on a farm. I was exposed to gardening. I was exposed to agriculture. I was exposed to horticulture. But, we didn't grow up on a farm. And I think that it's just a little bit of knowledge, just introducing people to the topic. It goes a long way because people are excited about it. It's a very benign thing that a person can talk about or do, but it's so good for the common world, like we should all be on board. I think educating is the biggest part about that.
Right, but here's kind of the challenge, is that the minute you say homesteading to a lot of people, they have this almost instant visceral reaction if they're not into it of, if you're a homesteader, that means you're like this, this guy that lives with, like you said, landmines around a school bus, and that's who you are. And so what's really fascinating is we're just talking about eating healthier food with less chemicals, having sort of a farm to market reach that's a little bit easier, producing some of your own food, and having a better understanding for the fact that package of beef was actually an animal, and as long as it's processed humanely and reasonably, there's no reason you can't eat it. So So, for me, the transition is I expose everyone to it. And then what I try and do is sort of adjust the conversation to just how sensitive they are about the subject. What are your thoughts? Well, how do you approach a new person and say, let's talk about homesteading?
Well, I think that I have very much the same kind of approach that you do, but from a more passive approach, I just try to post some shareable content. I try to post things that raise awareness more than anything else in the social media world, whether it was on television or whatever else. I just try to have an open dialogue with folks because there seems to be a bit of a disconnect. And that disconnect is either you have the people, I guess, who are suburban or cityites live in the middle. And then you have all these, you have the hipsters with the big beards and the flannel shirts, and they are well funded and they're young and they're energetic and they are actually doing a lot for the contemporary homesteading scene. But everybody wants to hate on the hipsters, including me. They're an easy target. You can't change your tire, but you got a beard that big and a red flannel. No good. Then you have the people who are the purest farmers, the people who are really producing.
Jay, can you change a tire?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't in the wrong room here.
I'm no master mechanic like you, and if I work on something, it might work again, but there's going to be extra parts I can use later. That's recycled. So, I'm not putting an LS2 in any Camaros coming up, but at the same time, I feel like it's important to know a little bit about everything. I was just underneath the damn mower again today, just doing some work on it. But then, in addition, now you have the hipsters, and you have all the people that live in the middle. Then you have the hipsters, then they're doing their thing, aquaponics and warehouses in Brooklyn. That's cool. Then you have the old school farmers, the OG guys that have been doing it. They're fifth generation farmers. They're growing most of the food for the world. And then, you have the folks who are the Ted Kaczynskis and all these maniacs that live out in the forest, or, even just real mountain men who still exist, or these pioneer spirited people. And that middle never knows where to look because they're constantly just looking at screens and they're seeing all the stuff they put on TV, all the stuff they're fed through media. So I believe that guys like us who just have a passion for it, it's kind of our mantle to just bring the information to the folks. And anybody who wants to talk about it, just be open to it. I haven't been on TV for years now, but I still have people that reach out and, ask me questions. And I try to answer every single one of them because I feel like if I am able to reach one person about, yellow spots on your tomato leaves, hey, man, I helped you out. That's great. But it's just bringing another person into the fold of understanding. And
well, wait. What are yellow spots on tomato leaves? I've never seen that. At least I haven't seen it. What is that?
There's all kinds of powdery mildew gets the white mildew. Then you can get blights. You can get heat. Tomatoes, they say they love hot heads and cool feet. But if you mess with the hydrology of a tomato too much, it can really stress it, and the plant will kind of go a little bit of it just starts to yellow. And it starts to really, it even actually looks like through where the veins and the leaves are will start to get yellow. But, you put a little bit of copper powder on it, or you up your nitrogen, and all of a sudden a lot of your problems, you spray a little neem oil, a natural solution, and a lot of your problems go away. Less pests, less disease, less, all kinds of stuff, bacteria. Bacterial leaf scorch is another one on a lot of plants in the Northeast where it gets real humid. So yeah, man, it's just, as long as we have people out there that are willing to share the knowledge, because contemporary homesteading, it's not just you and your neighbors anymore. It's a global situation, right? There's people all over the world doing really innovative things with agriculture. And, I might think about starting to grow tilapia somewhere in Maine, but there's a dude in the Philippines who came up with this really cool tank idea out of pallets and bamboo and whatever. How can I apply that to being in Bangor, Maine? And that's what's really cool, because the technology, even though so many people go off the rails with it, and I've been guilty too, but it's a tool. We could spread that knowledge and share it so easily through podcasts and social media and stuff.
So I have found and I just want to sort of address a couple of things. I've sort of gotten almost consumed by it because I'm to the point now where if I'm not producing something good and recycling it, it's like I don't even want to do it. Phantomworks, the company, was created because I hated seeing cars get thrown away, especially the beautiful cars that our forefathers designed and built. Harley Earl was a genius, and I hate seeing a 53 Cadillac or a 67 Corvette ever getting sort of disposed of, and thanks to a lot of restorers around the world, that just doesn't happen anymore. So when it comes to the food, I just want to see things sort of be used as many times as possible rather than thrown in the garbage. I'm disgusted by restaurants that throw away 1,000 pounds of food a day when that food could feed a whole lot of animals and be turned into produce. So
what's interesting about that, it's not always the restaurant, it's the local municipalities, the Board of Health, it's government telling them what they can and can't serve, putting a sell-by date on your milk, learning that, everybody thinks the eggs are going to go bad if it goes past the date in the carton. What people don't know, you can rub oil onto a eggshell and put it in a root cellar. It'll last a year without going rancid.
Exactly. We store our eggs for up to 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, and all you need is some non-putrefying oil and some straw in a cool spot, and they'll last. So, I think that, again, why is milk pasteurized? Why aren't we drinking raw milk? All the good bacteria we kill in milk through the pasteurization process is all born out of all kinds of nonsense and legend, urban myth. And, I can't drink a pint glass full of milk from the store because I'll blow everybody out of the house. But if I drank a pint of raw milk, it's not a problem.
Oh, we are now drinking only raw milk. We won't homogenize it or pasteurize it. We basically take it from the cow, run it through a cheesecloth, and it goes in the refrigerator. I separate it so that I can drink the milk, and then we use all the cream for butter, ice cream, sour cream, cheese, and the taste is just so much better. So,
the dairy I work at, conversely, I mean, when you're in production, homogenization is just a byproduct of having to milk so many animals, right? You don't have 3 or 4 or 5 cows that you can sit on a bucket and you can get in there and you can milk, and it's just like a fairy tale. When you have 160 to 250 animals any given day, and a huge percentage of that herd needs to be milked, homogenization is just a time saver and a lifesaver. The pasteurization, our dairy here, you can make microchips in our dairy, man. Like, it is a spotless, sanitized, like, sterile environment. It looks like, people should be walking around in X-Files suits, but that is because of the laws that are in place, but also because of just the ways our dairy operates. So, it's really fascinating that a guy like me, I can't drink a glass of milk store-bought. I drink almond milk now, because it's cheap out here. Or, if I can afford it, mac nut milk, that's a real splurge. But, we have most of our goat milk that we produce here goes to the babies and goes to cheese production. So I can't just go out and milk a goat here.
Well,
too many mandates.
That sucks. I mean, we're milking our goats. We've got 4 Nubians, and we're milking them. We're milking our cows, and just the quality. And quite honestly, for me, it's just knowing that I'm not drinking chemicals. I'm drinking the good bacteria. I'm drinking that real cream, that natural milk with no estrogen, no pesticides. We have never had a drop of pesticides on any of our 11 acres, not one. So.
That's beautiful. And through thoughtful processes in farming and homesteading, you don't have a burden because you're not using pest control. You're not using, all this stuff that, you don't have a crop duster flying over your 11 acres. There's no genetically modified, grain or seeds going into your property. So then you can't even clean those seeds as a farmer. The farmers used to clean their seeds. That was their next year's crop. Now, Monsanto comes in and they're like, no, man, we got a patent on that seed because there's, glyphosate inside that seed that's preventing all the weeds. Well, here, how about this? You're putting Roundup into the corn seed. The corn's growing. It's also killing all the milkweed, and the milkweed is the only thing monarch butterfly larvae can eat. And the biggest vector for milkweed is on the fringe of cornfields. So here you are. Well, great. You have a crappier tasting, less yielding corn, and you're killing all the wildlife around it that's needed. So where does it end? It's like a dog chasing its tail after a while. One of my best lessons when I went to go do workshops at elementary schools is I'd show the kids an apple from the supermarket. I'd show them an apple I plucked off the orchard tree on the way to the school. I'd be like, which apple do you guys want to buy? And every single time the kids are like, the supermarket one. It's nice, it's shiny, it's
They're
red,
beautiful.
it looks like all the... But, you know, they don't know that that thing was in some kind of refrigerated warehouse in Chile with all kinds of weird gases getting pumped in there so they don't turn brown or spotty. And then they're on an airplane or a boat or a truck coming all the way up here when that other apple was picked right off the tree, and it's going to taste better. It might not be the prettiest person at the dance, but it's going to taste really good. You know, it's like, we have that disconnect.
Yeah. Everybody wants the beautiful food, and when in fact, rarely is the beautiful food the healthy food. It's almost always the other way around.
I have never seen anything more beautiful than a platter full of heirloom vegetables. Like when you show people like purple carrots and like, you know, striped peppers and, you know, black cream tomatoes or blackstone cherries, you know, the people are just like, what is that? And you're like, that's food that's not ruined. Like there are a whole bunch of people out there saving those seeds for a reason.
But the reality is we have to try and re-educate people that if it looks like plastic fruit and it's perfect, it probably is plastic fruit. It just hasn't changed that last molecule over yet.
Well, it's funny because I found living in Hawaii and farming in Hawaii when I was filming the TV show, and I plucked an orange off a tree at a location we were filming at, and it was like a life-changing orange. Like I went out and I got like 5 or 6 more for the crew, and I sliced them up. I'm like, you guys got to try these oranges. Like it tastes like you think oranges should taste. Like you never had one. That's what you think in your mind. And that's the beauty, you know, because you come out here and you pull a mango off the tree or you pull an avocado off the ground, even if you're careful. And it looks like the ones that do in the supermarket, but they're just right here. You know, it's fascinating at disconnect. Like you talked about chop meat, you know, fresh chop meat. You know, people think that 1 pound styrofoam tray is from a cow. Good luck. Like that's about 30 different cows ground up into a pound of meat. And people are like, they hear that and they're like, bleh, you know, what, oh my God, what am I eating? But it's true, you know, it's like how many people on 4th of July have a hot dog or 10? Yeah, enjoy that. Out here, Spam is like the national food, the cultural food out here. And that's like the worst thing possibly a human can eat.
Well, the good thing about Spam is that it'll last something like 5,000 years in the can. I mean, it just, you know, it'll last longer than Twinkies, which is known as the longest lasting food in the world.
You were in the service and you've eaten plenty of MREs, I'm sure. And you know those things, just a little Tabasco and you hope the peanut butter tastes better.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, that's a survival food. And look, so what we're talking about is a transition from just eating to eating right and healthy and the way, and I would have to say the way God intended, right? I don't think God created Monsanto. I think Monsanto was a man-made thing, but the tomatoes and the apples and the carrots and the bananas, they were a God-made thing. So I prefer to sort of take it from God than Monsanto. So I'm just a fan of the natural way.
I mean, I like the natural way just because the natural way is the way that, you know, the universe is supposed to, it's going to be healthy. And if something doesn't come to bear fruit because it was sick, then you don't get the fruit. Like that's Mother Nature just weeding it out, right? Like if the apple tree doesn't produce, well, the frost got to it or the insects got to it or the fungus got to it. Now you know not to eat it. So you move on to growing the next thing or finding the next thing, foraging. So yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff out there, and how much stuff is out there that we don't eat as a mainstream culture? Like crickets, you know, you grind those things up into flour and you can make bread as good as any other bread. Plus it's got tons of protein in it. And it costs like a 16th or some astronomical amount less to grow crickets than it does to wheat. You know, it's just
and so I'm just gonna look. I've eaten ants, I've eaten rats, I've eaten snakes. Actually, not too bad. I'm not sure that I'm ready to grind up crickets for bread quite yet. When I'm using whole grain wheat, so I might just stick with that for the moment. But I'll tell you what, I will consider. I'll make you a deal. You come from Hawaii with some crickets ground up. I'll give you some fresh cow and goat milk, and we'll sort of see how the meal goes. How's that?
Absolutely. But I'll tell you what, it's that exact statement, though, where people like they hit that roadblock mentally. They're like, whoa, crickets is food. And you're like, yeah, man, like it doesn't taste like crickets. And who the hell knows what a cricket tastes like anyway? So, by the time you grind that thing up and you process it just as much as wheat's got to get processed, but it takes a huge carbon footprint less to raise those crickets. It's just like anything else. Once you get over that mindset, I bet you if tomorrow all the wheat in the world disappeared because of some weird disease and we had to eat cricket flour, there'd be a lot of banana bread and a whole lot of pancakes being made out of crickets.
Okay, I'll give it a thought. All right, so we a parting thought. Going forward, if you were trying to educate other people on putting out the word, what is like 2 or 3 thoughts on how you're going to get out the word to people who have never farmed, have never raised anything, don't realize that beef actually comes from a cow and they think it comes from the supermarket wrapped in plastic? How are you going to educate those people about contemporary homesteading?
I think first, I tell people accept failure. Just like you want to achieve success, you are going to kill plants, you are going to lose livestock, you are going to run into drought scenarios. So accept that there are going to be roadblocks and failures along the way, just like anything else in life. Make the change slowly. Don't think you're going to dive into it and you're going to buy a bunch of acreage and you're going to quit your IT job and you're going to go, because one of the toughest parts of homesteading is being able to have a livelihood and monetize your homestead. It's very, very difficult. There's very, very little success in agribusiness in contemporary society. And the other part is once you gain this knowledge, first, never stop learning. And always disseminate that knowledge, whether it's social media, whether it's going to workshops, whether it's going to community garden meetings. Like, share what you've learned and always continue to learn more. And that grows the global community and it grows the understanding and the acceptance of the words contemporary homesteading. Again, people won't think you're waiting for the zombie apocalypse or whatever. You're just a person who wants accountability, self-reliance, and understanding. And that's what it basically boils down to on a base level.
Okay, that's fair. I'll tell you what I'm doing right now is I start by just talking about the health benefits of having food that is not processed in a big factory, that is not grown with, chemicals, fertilizers. I heard a news report, 75% of the aquifer under China is so toxic, they can't even use it for washing. It is undrinkable, and they can't even use it for washing their hands. So that's all the pesticides and everything leaching in. So I try to explain to people, grow it naturally. It might not look pretty, but it's so much healthier. It's so much tastier. And then once you've done that and you realize that tomato on your sandwich came from you, you're going to want to go on to the next step. And maybe the next step is producing a little bit of clean water and maybe even a solar panel or two. So I'm trying to get people into it starting from health and food security.
Yeah, I mean, and the dominoes will fall that way too, right? You've probably seen it 100 times yourself. You get people excited about it, and they might have a stopping point somewhere before you or me or someone else. But you know what? If they got out there and they spent the time with their children and taught them, hey, man, you could take this cracked half an egg, put a little soil in it, put a seed in it, put it on the windowsill, and the seed comes out, take a whole eggshell, put it in there. These are little lessons that now we're giving these children, this next generation coming through. They put it in their pocket, fine. But, at least we're still working the soil. We're still, understanding where it all comes from. Because if we lose touch with that understanding, I mean, it's all over, right? Like, that's it. So it's I just try to let people know, man, just go out and have fun with it, enjoy it. And if it sucks, go to the store.
Yeah. I agree. I'm having so much fun. I would have a hard time going back to the store, though. I'll be honest.
For sure. Yeah, but then again, we talk about the health of everything too. I just turned 49, and my spirit animal I've come to discover is the gummy bear. Like every once in a while, you got to go off the reservation, but as long as you can really just reap whatever benefits you can and disseminate that information so other folks can take it and run. That's what our global responsibility is, really.
All right. So, Jay, parting thoughts. Are you starting a new show, I understand?
Well, no, right now I'm just doing a couple podcasts. I am actually just out there on social media a little bit, not even. I've been laying low, man. And, the possibility of doing some more shows, as long as I can educate and the right project comes along, I'll be part of it. And I believe that at the end of the day, I won't compromise my belief structure and who I am as a person, how I believe in this whole contemporary homesteading world. I'll jump on a project, and I think that more people need to understand, man. It just comes down to education. And you know this through your training. Obviously, I was a Lieutenant Mountain Rescue. The more repetition, the more you work at it, the more you strive to get that education out there. Hopefully people follow, If you could change one person's life for the better, right, you did a good thing.
I agree. Only my hope is maybe we can change a few thousand or even a few million people's lives, because I am concerned about what's happening. I'm concerned about the inflation and perhaps with people just having a sense of security of being able to produce a little bit, it will make them care or worry a little bit less. So at the end, that's kind of my goal, is I want to reduce the stress of eating in America.
That and heighten the awareness at the same time, right? Like heighten the awareness of living healthy and trying to make your best choices. You might not be perfect. No one is, really, especially in the society now where fast food's on every corner and it's just there. But if you just try to do better, you are a guiding example of that, the way you guys are living. But realistically, not everybody can have that dedication, If I reach out and just change someone a little bit or change their mindset so they can start thinking with more of an open mind, I'm happy with that, man. But, it seemed like on television it was getting real popular for a while. Now it seems to be waning a little bit. And hopefully the world, even after the pandemic, you'd think more people would jump into it. But, it seems like it's got a good foundation, but we really need people like yourself, like myself, just still getting the word out there and explaining to people, instead of, going out to do whatever, just plant a garden this weekend. Put one damn plant in a pot.
That's right. A man that works here, he had a great saying. He said, the best day to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best day to plant a tree is today. So I believe if you didn't do it on the first best day, at least do it on the second best day.
Absolutely. It's never too late, bro. It's never too late.
So if people want to communicate with you through social media, email, whatever you want, why don't you take a minute and just sort of give out your contact information?
The best way to hit me up on social media is Facebook, Jay Gruen from the Homestead. Also, my Facebook page is Jay Gruen from the Homestead. There's not a ton of activity there because real life happens. But if people hit me up, I will always answer them. I will always get back to them. And it's me doing it. It's not one of my lackeys or something else. I'm not some big TV dude. I'm just the guy who sits there with his laptop and looks and reads and answers. Also, you can find me on Instagram too at NJ Guy, NHI, like New Jersey guy in Hawaii. And I like to have a lot of fun with it. I put a lot of crazy stuff. I'm a little bit more loose-lipped and liberal than a lot of people would think. So I'm always out there just putting the funny stuff out as well, because it can't all be work, right? So, and there's lots of people, we can learn from their mistakes and we can learn from their successes. So I try to put all that stuff out in my social media.
One last question, and I just want like a 10-second answer. Are you enjoying all of the, or at least some of the fruits of the labor of doing all this homesteading stuff? Is it rewarding to you?
Homesteading today is absolutely rewarding, and it's worth the time and the effort for anybody.
Good answer. I couldn't agree more. Every day that I learn something else, I realize that it was all worth it, and the work gets less as you get better at it. And so to me, look, we've done the things, we've had the dead stock, we've had the dead animals, but we've had a lot of livestock and a lot of live, fruits and berries and vegetables. And so in the end, I've learned a ton, and I love every minute of it. So glad you do too.
I agree, man. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really do appreciate it. It's a pleasure to always have a conversation with someone else that's in the world, out there doing this stuff and trying to get the good word out.
Okay. Well, you've made me think about llamas. So I'm going to have to give that a little bit of thought here because I don't have llamas. So alpaca. Well, aren't llamas and alpacas basically the same animal?
Absolutely not. Llamas are a beast of burden. You can put weight on their back and they will fiercely protect your livestock. So if you have a flock of sheep, put a couple llama out there, the wolves, the coyotes won't go anywhere near them. Alpaca are more like the sheep. They're very docile. They don't have hooves, so they don't ruin the homestead. They have a dedicated dung pile. They have no lanolin in their wool. They taste delicious. Alpacas, I contend, are one of the foods of the future for the mainland U.S.
Okay, but they spit, and I'm not into having animals spitting on me.
Yeah, well, you get over it. If you've ever milked anything, it's always a risk.
Yeah, that's true. Jay, have a great one.
So, you too, brother. Thank you for having me on, Dan.
Yep.
Have a great day.
All right, so folks, we've been online with Jay here. I learned a whole lot. Obviously, I've got to rethink alpacas. I certainly have to sort of rethink Hawaii as an ecosystem rather than a vacation spot, and that's fascinating to me. That they're goat farming and reutilising everything from the land, the vegetables, the waste. So quite honestly, I didn't really think of the possibilities of it, but in fact, who knows, maybe someday it'll be a trip to Hawaii and look for a little farm there too. So stay tuned. We will have Sabra from City Classic Cars here, and we're going to talk about the myths and realities of doing custom work on cars, including the all sort of fearful painting that classic car. We're going to talk about it, so please stay tuned and come back.